Good morning. I'm Dan Bostrom, Rails Member Engagement Manager. Today's event is the Rails Online Roundtable, the ins and outs of material challenges. We have three panelists today who are going to present three different perspectives on material challenges and the policies around them. I'm happy to say that this is a multi-type panel. We've been able to recruit two public librarians and then one school librarian. And actually one of our public librarians has a school background, so I feel like we're hitting a lot of bases. So I'm going to take a quick look at our agenda. So I'm going to try to go through the introductions and welcome really quickly. Then we're going to get to our panelists, and our panelists are going to do some quick presentations. Each panelist is going to talk for about 10 minutes, which should leave us for about 20 minutes at the end for a Q&A discussion. We do have some polls in there as well. And then at the very end, I'm going to come back and do a conclusion and wrap up for you all. Okay, just a kind of reminder about the Q&A. So you have two options. You can either type your question into the chat and I'll ask it for you, or you can use the hand raising feature and we'll call on you to unmute. We do want to note that the Q&A portion will not be recorded. We are only recording the panelists, and we just want to make people feel comfortable asking the questions that they want to ask. Okay, some things that are coming up that I wanted to make you aware of. The first is a data webinar that is happening in 2 weeks. Sam Subar is the Electronic Resources Coordinator at Moraine Valley Community College, and he's going to talk about how to use data to predict outcomes. So if you want a great primer for data forecasting, I really think this webinar is for you. It's on Wednesday, March 31st. It's at 10 a.m. And you'll notice that data is a theme of some of the events that we have coming up. Rails is really trying to hit this for our members. Another theme that you're going to find is the material challenges. So if you like learning about how to prepare for a materials challenge, and why wouldn't you be if you're here today, we have a webinar that's coming up in early April that I think you'll want to check out. Dr. Shannon Oltman is an associate professor at the School of Information Science at the University of Kentucky. She's going to talk about the reasons why patrons challenge books and other materials. I think this one's going to be really good. School librarians, if you're out there today, you can see the time. It's at 4 to 5:30 p.m. on April 5th. We tried to get it in after school so that you can attend, and I really hope that you can make it. Another online roundtable just like this one is coming up also in early April. It's my colleague Grant Halter. As I mentioned, data is a big focus for us right now. Grant is the Rails Data Analysis Manager, and it's going to be a conversation about data resources. So Grant has created actually a data resources page on the Rails website. It contains information like that IPLAR dashboard that you can see right there on that slide. So Grant took all of the public data that is reported to the Illinois State Library. He made a really useful tool for searching and mapping that data. And he's going to talk about how to use that as well as some other useful data tools. We look forward to hearing from you about the things that you use in your own community and your own libraries. So this will primarily be for public libraries, but I think that anyone is welcome to attend, and I think anyone can get something useful about it. It's going to be a nice conversation about data in libraries. Lastly, I want to mention a new resource, and this is right on the Rails homepage. You can find it. Just look for the Materials Challenge button. And so it's an entire page. It's devoted to materials challenges. We have links to resources, events like this one, and the webinar that I mentioned coming up. We have example policies on there and much, much more. So it is linked directly from our homepage. Check it out. It's a great place to find a lot of the sample policies that we hope that you'll be able to use in your own library. Okay, so we are at the portion of time where we're going to hear from our panelists, and we have three panelists this morning. We have Amanda Schaeffer, who's a school librarian at Midwest Central High School. We have Amelia Kmiec, who is the branch librarian at Winnetka-Northfield Public Library District. And we have Kristin Holzhauer, who is the director at the Pontiac Public Library. The first person we're going to hear from today is Kristin. So Kristin, I'm going to stop sharing, and I am going to let you share.
Okay, thank you. I will pull this up here. Okay, hopefully you can all see that now.
Looks great.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kristin Holzhauer, and I am the director at the Pontiac Public Library. I have been a director here since 2016. Today, I'm going to briefly touch on my experience with a difficult materials challenge. This will specifically be from the lens of an administrator in a small public municipal library. And I will also share some tips for preparing your library for a potential materials challenge. In early 2018, my library received a complaint over the Game of Thrones DVDs in our collection. My library had recently added a number of these seasons on DVD to the collection, and because of their popularity at the time, they were circulating heavily. The patron that initiated the challenge had checked out just one season of the collection and had only viewed a portion of the first episode. In her complaint, she stated that the DVDs were pornographic, and she accused the library of promoting pornography within the community. Unfortunately, because I was a new director at the time, the patron also added a personal attack on my character as part of her complaint. In her opinion, I was the one who was the problem, and I was the one who was promoting the pornography and making the library collection dangerous. She went so far as requesting that the city and the board reconsider my hire here as director in the library, and she wanted information regarding my hire from the city. Needless to say, it was a difficult materials challenge to diffuse, but because of some incredibly timely support and some important resources that were provided to us at the time of the challenge, my board and I were prepared to appropriately discuss the importance of intellectual freedom for the library and inform this patron why they are so important. Today, I'm happy to say that the DVDs remain in our collection, but more importantly, we've kept this patron as a regular user within our library. So how can you ensure that intellectual freedom is upheld in your library should you receive a materials challenge like this one? Well, it all starts with preparation. Establishing or refreshing your library's policies and procedures is your first line of defense. Additionally, spending time reviewing intellectual freedom at its roots and truly understanding its importance by providing training to your board and staff ensures that your library is ready to handle patron interactions and properly advocate for intellectual freedom in your library. There are a few things I found beneficial to have in library policies and procedures when addressing a challenge. For your policies, your collection policies should first state that your library adopts ALA's statements on intellectual freedom as policy. This includes the Library Bill of Rights, the freedom to read, and the freedom to view statements, so that it includes all formats of content within your collection. It should also state that only registered patrons of your library can submit a request for reconsideration. And additionally, that requests for reconsideration can only be submitted for items that your library owns. Finally, your policies should include a statement that inclusion of library items within the collection does not equate to endorsement of those items by your library. For your procedures, you should require that all requests for reconsideration be submitted to the board in writing using a request for reconsideration form. This can be a simple one-page questionnaire that the patrons submit regarding their complaint. And the first question on this questionnaire for the patron should be whether they have read or viewed the item they are challenging. The purpose of this request for reconsideration form is twofold. The first, being asked to complete a questionnaire as part of a complaint will help sort out the serious complaints from those that may not be so serious. When a patron is asked to detail their complaint in writing, sometimes they just decide to back away from the challenge. Secondly, it provides a way for the patron to constructively detail the reasons for their complaint in writing. This gives you a way to better understand the complaint at its roots and begin respectful and productive conversations with the patron. Additionally, for your procedures, you want to establish written procedures for how the patron will address the board and how your board will address the patron regarding their challenge. This will assist both parties in clear expectations for the communication that they will receive. And the procedures should clearly state that your board will not make an immediate decision with regards to the materials challenge. Just to give you perspective, in my personal situation, this was handled over the course of a few months. That helps diffuse the situation as well. There are several resources available to you that can spark conversations with your staff and your library boards. I'm going to start by highlighting ALA's Office of Intellectual Freedom today. In my particular materials challenge at the library, ALA was incredibly supportive. When I first called, they were right there on the phone, ready to offer support, and they continued to check in with me over the course of our materials challenge. They even offered to send representatives to my library to assist me and my board with advocating for intellectual freedom. I highly recommend the information on their website. I also suggest that you bookmark this website and keep their contact information in your files. In addition to ALA's resources, information can be found on the Rails website. As Dan mentioned, Rails has just launched a new materials challenge post page. This is a great collection of resources that you can link to directly from their homepage. Additionally, on Rails, there's continuing education webinars and a policy bank to assist you with reviewing your policies and procedures and training your board and staff. The Illinois State Library and the Illinois Library Association's websites are also helpful. They provide advocacy information as well as some samples of policies that you can review. If you have access to OCLC's Web Junction, there are some helpful webinars there, and I have listed some of their titles here. These were actually webinars that my staff and board viewed from Web Junction, excuse me. Additionally, I want to remind everyone to network with your neighboring libraries and library groups for support. There is a wealth of support just in having your area libraries to work with. If you don't have a library group or a way to network with librarians, create one, be the leader of one. There's certainly strength in numbers when you work together. Remember that a truly great library contains something in it to offend everyone. If you should ever receive a materials challenge, it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing something wrong. In fact, it could mean you're doing things right. I hope I have given you some starting points to begin important discussions and training on intellectual freedom for your library. I have included my information on this slide again for you. I certainly consider myself one of your neighboring libraries. So if you ever need assistance or a simple supportive listening ear, please feel free to contact me. Thank you very much. I'm going to now turn this over to Amelia.
Thank you, Kristin. That was lovely. I also want to remind all the viewers that there's going to be some overlap between what Kristin, Amanda, and I talk about today. And that is not without intention. The idea is that we want to hammer home from different perspectives what you can do to protect yourselves and to arm yourselves when you're dealing with book challenges. So see that as a happy reminder that, you know, it's a good idea. So, hi, my name is Amelia. I have an MLIS from U of I. I work at the Northfield Branch Library, but I have a youth focus. I work at the Winnetka-Northfield Library District. I was in education for 10 years. I worked in Illinois in schools and Indiana schools, private, public, charter, suburban, rural, and urban. So I come to you today with a perspective as someone who's dealt with challenges and also who wants you to feel empowered in your role as a public servant. So next slide, Kristin. Thank you very much. I start with this phrase, consider an empathetic lens when handling book challenges, because I know that you came to this profession with passion. I came to teaching with passion. I came to librarianship with passion. And you're going to be dealing with people who are also equally as passionate as you are, and it makes it a very difficult situation to deal with. As a librarian, we feel like we work really hard to bring materials to our communities that educate them on tough topics, topics that might make them uncomfortable. And you're often dealing with people who are challenging the books that have the same amount of passion as you and just may not have a good understanding of what the situation is. So how do you come to a resolution? It's a great question. Let's start with the concept of a ban. It's a totally buzzworthy term. Kristin, next slide, thank you. ALA defines it, a ban, as a challenge to an attempt to remove or restrict materials based on the objections of a person or group. The banning is the removal of a group. The problem is, as much as this seems cut and dry, bans are subjective. The idea of a ban means something different to a different person, okay? I work at a very small branch library. I remove books from shelves on a regular basis, and I'm not taking a stance when I remove it, okay? That is not what everyone's perception is, okay? So just using my experience, you know, I work at a library and it's a small, we call it a boutique branch. People come in because they like the feeling of working and browsing in a library that has modern stuff, that has the most current books. We don't keep every single book in the collection. We do a lot of it based on space, circulation, what my patrons want, what are my patrons checking out, what new book is coming out, what are the award winners, and it's not an easy balance to keep them all, okay? I just did a whole thing where I had to pull a bunch of books that I had weeded, which is the term we use for removing a book, because they had been award winners, and I had to go through what I had done because they hadn't been circling recently. And it was a similar situation I heard from other librarians when dealing with the Mouse book that just recently incurred some ire with the Tennessee School Board because it had not circled because it is a book that came out in the 1990s. So I also want to make a good point of saying too, that another reason the balance is also tricky is we're going to talk a little bit too right now about EDI, which is something that book publishing and libraries have been making a consistent effort to incorporate more in their collections. So it affects good teachers and good librarians, especially with the communities they're dealing with. Can you go to the next slide, Kristin? Great. So librarians and book publishers are trying to make a concerted effort to get kids to read outside their bubble. What is a bubble? It's what is familiar and known. Children start to form perceptions at 3 years of age, and you could be as rich in your pockets as Elon Musk, but unless you have familiarities with people who look and sound and act differently than you, you can be experiencing something that's called information poverty. It's basically a gap or understanding based on poorly developed information infrastructure. It makes you think that makes a person think that they are the norm and typical, and it leads to problems in perception. We want to present stories from people who are in counter storytelling roles, which means that they're people who are experiences are not often told. And traditionally, in the last 100 years of book publishing, we've traditionally seen a lot of white middle class to upper class children, and then ones we see that are lower class are usually stereotyped. Can you go to the next slide? Awesome. So in this infographic, which I made for a class last summer, I detailed the variety of ways you can get people to read outside their bubble in terms of displays, in terms of storytelling, in terms of making sure that you are understanding where that's coming from. The reason I point this out is because people tend to get really upset when they don't understand the context of what the changing tides are. A book that might have been very loved to them, such as To Kill a Mockingbird, or even we were talking this morning among my coworkers about Little House on the Prairie, and they don't understand why it has been deemed as wrong or problematic. And they don't understand the current movement to bring people that are different into modern day book stories and stuff like that. And so it's very difficult for them to, and so that's sometimes where these people become upset. And I guess the question is, knowing all of that, how do you deal with someone who's upset? Can you go to the next slide, Kristin? So what can you do in the moment? And this is very hard for me. I was a theater teacher. I'm a very emotional person. I'm a very, I speak with my emotions and I wear my heart on my sleeve. You want to really start by de-escalating the situation and getting it down to a point where you can understand them, even if you don't necessarily agree with them. So I'm using this, I got it from one of my teachers, Linda, and she was talking about the idea of being felt, and found. I've understood when I felt, I understand where you are coming from. I understand what you are feeling. I have felt this way in the past when something happened that was similar, but this is what I have found, and presenting them with different, stats and information on the subject in which their child is addressing or someone is viewing that is problematic to them. Okay. This is the empathetic lens. The idea of it may seem foreign, especially when it's in the heat of the moment, but you want to make sure that they are understanding and also realizing maybe the flaws on your side as well. So it's sort of like a both sort of sides of the story. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So hopefully throughout this presentation, in addition to this, and Kristin really detailed how the ways you can empower your board, but as a librarian, I want you to hopefully understand how you can empower yourself as a librarian. Number one, know your community. 2, know the world of librarianship. 3, know your policies. So when someone challenges a book, you can say what Kristin said about, how they can submit it to the board. Work as a team. I am not an island. I do the best work when I am informed by other people who work with me, and I check out things I have all the time that I think are problematic with my coworkers. Front load any material, concerns, displays that you might have an issue with your supervisor. It's not a bad thing to run them by. There's safety in numbers, which Kristin also detailed. Also create maintain a strong working relationship with your administration. I talk to my library director all of the time. I wanted her to be aware of what I'm doing and also, what's going on, especially with a different concern. So hopefully this helps you a little bit in dealing with book challenges. Can you go to the next slide, Kristin? I found this quote by David Lankes. He's a professor at Syracuse. Bad libraries build good collections, good libraries build services, and great libraries build communities. My point is saying that you want to have conversation around these books because that's what books are inspired to do in the first place. And shutting down the conversation or not creating the conversation truly is harmful for all sides of the perspective. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to turn it over to Amanda.
Hello, everyone. I am going to warn you now, the bell just rang for the next period to start, and I know the bell's going to ring 2 more times and it can be really loud, so I will try to mute myself really quickly as to not burst your eardrums. So my name is Amanda Schaeffer. I am high school librarian for Midwest Central School District. I do help make decisions and do purchases for the entire school district, but day to day I am at the high school with our lovely, wonderful teenagers. I love working with teenagers, and I actually have a background in public libraries. I've been in public libraries since 2013 and at many libraries actually in the Central Illinois area, and I still work part-time at the Farmington area public library. So this has continued to give me an interesting perspective as I continue to work in public libraries, as I'm seeing the different sides and seeing what's going on. So for me, I have never actually dealt with a book challenge, an official book challenge. I've had some patrons who have come in to complain about a book at the public libraries, but typically once I tell them, I am sorry, we can't just take it off the shelves, but we do have a policy, I can share it with you. There's, some paperwork to fill out. That typically pushes them off right away. So I strongly encourage you to have a conversation with them, tell them what the policy is, and sometimes that right there can de-escalate the situation. Kristin had talked about that earlier. Just have a conversation with them about it. So for us at the school, we have our policies, specifically a part of our collection development policy. It is the bigger part of our collection development policy. It is several pages. I have been rather happy with what we've had. There are some changes I would like to make, but Kristin, if you want to go to the next slide, I highly encourage you to update your policy on a regular basis. One, because then you know what is in your policy, and then there might be things that, like I said, you need to update. Some things I have found important, especially as I'm the only librarian in the high school, we have one other librarian in the district. There's just the two of us, to just cover everything, to make sure you've covered your bases and that you know you're safe. We have one of the first things at the top of our policy is that any resident or employee of the school district may formally challenge library materials on the basis of appropriateness. And I appreciated that it has to be a resident of the school district, an employee, because over the last several months, I had heard about a group in Illinois. It was specifically parents who were going around to seeing what books are in school libraries, in public libraries that they felt shouldn't be there, so that they could go and protest those items being in the collection. And if you have that in your policy, if they don't have anyone in their group who is complaining about these items, who is asking you to take them out, in the end, there's nothing that they can do. There's nothing that can be done. So I have appreciated seeing that statement in there. When we were having our discussions, one thing Kristin had, I believe it was Kristin, had talked about was no disciplinary action will happen to the staff member who made the purchase. For me, most people will come in, my students, and see, oh, you purchased this book. Well, sometimes lately it's been a donation. Someone has just given it to me, maybe a staff member or someone. I'm very present on TikTok and social media. Maybe someone's donated it to us. So it wasn't specifically a purchase that I made with school money, or we've gotten a lot of grants. So while I may have made that specific purchase choice, it wasn't with district money. And then you cannot challenge a book from another library is something I would like for us to add, because we are a part of RSA, obviously, we are a part of Rails, and there's nothing we can do about another library having a book in their collection. And then we also include the Library Bill of Rights. There were other items that Kristin talked about in her presentation, the freedom to read, freedom to view, that I would like to add to our policy. But just starting with the Library Bill of Rights, I have felt like has at least started to give whoever is complaining about a book, who wants to challenge a book being in our collection, a good place to start to read about, okay, this is where the librarian is coming from. They may or may not agree, but they're getting a bit more information than they would have if we didn't have that a part of it. So Kristin, if you want to go to the next slide. Thank you. So some things to do is make others aware of your policy, and that's everyone in the district. Talk to your administration. I know we've had newer administration the last few years, while it's all been in-house people just moving around into administrative roles. They may or may not have been aware as you think they are. And talk to your staff, because any staff member could get a parent complaining about, oh, hey, my kid brought this book home. Especially if they know that staff member really well, they're going to feel comfortable talking to them about it and may not know where to start. And if the staff members aren't aware that you have a policy like this, they're not going to know where to start. Hopefully they'll come to you or the principal, and that would be a good place to start, but let them know where to go. And then the school board is something that is definitely needing to be aware of the policy. Kristin or Amelia had mentioned, make the school board aware when they get new members. Hey, we have this policy. We want you to be aware of it just in case anything happens. You need to be aware of this so that if we have to move forward with a challenge, it may eventually make its way to the school board. I have been a part of a lot of Facebook library groups, and I have seen so many school librarians who are seeing these challenges and they're not prepared. They're like, where do I even start? Start by looking at what other school librarians have. If you want to go to the next slide, Kristin, network. Talk to other librarians, area librarians, whether it's a school library or a public library. I come from the public library world. I have a lot of friends who are librarians. I trying to talk to our public librarian here in town. It's someone who is local, but Kristin and Amelia, I see us as local, anyone who is RSA and Rails. If you're a school librarian and aren't aware of the Library Media Specialist Group, it's through the LTC, the Learning Technology Center of Illinois. I highly encourage you to check that group out. We meet once or twice a month, and it's just a great time to get together. And we have been talking a lot about book bans and book challenges and what we can do to offset those. But I would encourage you to see if you need to put a policy together or want to alter yours, or just make sure you have what you need, is to just look at what other school libraries have. I am more than happy to share ours, and others may be willing to as well. So thank you.